Hey, Xancers, Anthony Rose. So you want to dance two-step, right? So there is no way to avoid it. You're going to turn, spin a lot, okay? So if you're going to dance two-step, you should know how to do that. Now, in this video, this is your ultimate guide to two-step turns, okay? So we're gonna cover everything from the connection to the different types of turns and when you use a turn and why you should do a turn, spotting, partnership, like the whole thing. So stick around, and by the end of this, you will be better at two-step turns. All right, guys, we put together a collection of a dozen of our most important tips on how to do two-step turns, okay? So we're gonna cover a lot of things in this video. Pretty much everything you need to know is contained within this one thing. But before we get into that, in case you haven't heard, summer's coming. So what that means is that we are going back on tour. We're traveling the country doing our workshops, okay? So here's what we want to know from you guys. Number one, where are you guys located? Like, where are you watching from? And tell us a little bit about your dance community. We want to go where we can be the most useful. What do you like about your dance community? What do you not like about? Where are the cool places to go dancing?
And while you're down there, hit that subscribe button so you can become a next dancer and you know when all the awesome stuff happens.
All right, tip number one. All right, guys, tip number 1 of 12 to make your two-step turns better is something we have to talk about before we even get into the other stuff. This is like a preemptive tip. So what we're telling you here is be patient. This is going to take some time. You're not going to be good at this at first. Like when you first start doing turns, you're going to kind of suck, right? But you practice and then you suck maybe a little bit less, and eventually you might not even suck at all.
Just embrace the suck.
Just embrace the suck.
Just know it's gonna happen.
Just know that that's going to happen. So know that that's a process, and it does, promise you, get better over time. All right, guys, tip number 2 of 12 for better two-step turns is be deliberate. So a lot of people make the mistake of thinking, okay, well, we do this thing and then we do this spin and we turn to the left and then we stop and we do this other thing. And that's great. That's like the big picture, but you have to actually do the pieces in between. You've got to know that when you do something, which foot are you going to be on which count, and where are you facing? Like every step. Yeah, think of it as process, not just rah and go, okay? So understand each piece along the way, because it's not just this piece and then I do that piece, it's everything that leads in between. And think of it as a process. All right, guys, tip number 3 for better two-step turns is do the right turn at the right time. There are, in two-step, 3 separate types of turns that we use. Now, we did a video on this a while back. We're gonna link that in the cards. We'll also put it down in the description. So there are pivots, chaînés, and spirals, okay? So you need to know those 3 different types of turns, but also know when to use one, because each one has benefits. There's certain times you wanna use a pivot and certain times you wanna use a chaîné or a spiral, okay? It's not just turn, okay? Again, if you don't know what a pivot, a chaîné, or a spiral is, watch that video. We give a full breakdown of that. But here's the overall view. If I'm turning her, like I'm just walking alongside of her and I'm turning her, we prefer those to be pivot turns. Okay? However, on the other hand, if we are both turning, like if we're here and we're both turning, we prefer that to be a chaîné. All right? So anytime where we're in tandem, like if we're in this position and we're both turning like we're doing these windmills, this would be a chaîné, which is the feet come apart, the feet come together, and the feet come apart again. Those things just work better in tandem as a chaîné. The third different type of turn is a spiral. That's anytime we want to create a sharp contrast, or we're giving her an over rotation and giving her that snap. So if we do a lariat, she's going to do 3 pivot turns, pivot, 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 and then she finishes with a spiral. So she's going to go pivot, pivot, pivot. I allow her to take that extra step and then spiral her out to give her that sharp contrast. Now, there is a mistake. And there's some really great dancers that, like, it's kind of like a lot of great dancers kind of sit on one side of the fence or not. Everything should be a chaîné, right?
Politics.
Or everything should be a pivot. And no, I mean, they're both wrong. I mean, I'm not saying they're totally wrong, because there's benefit to doing one and there's different styles. However, to ultimately get really good at turning, know which one has certain perks and benefits. Like if I do a pivot, what does that create? The reason to use a pivot is because you've constantly got this motion where you're constantly moving, and it's tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. It's this constant movement.
Evenly spaced.
Chaînés work better anytime we're in tandem because it allows me to kind of slip through. So if we do these tandem turns again, if my feet are apart and I need to go underneath, this just works better when my feet come together than it would if we both had the feet coming apart. So there's a benefit to doing that. And a spiral is just something we want to create that sharp contrast. So learn the 3 different types of turns. If you don't know them. It's not just turn to the left or turn to the right. Get good at those turns and then figure out when, why, and where you want to do each one. All right, tip number 4 for better two-step turns is assume 1.5 times. So if you're turning, you have to assume that you're going to turn 1.5. Not 1, not 47.5, it's 1.5. Now, sometimes you do turn 1, sometimes you might, probably shouldn't, but you could turn 47.5, all right?
So what this base...
Yeah, so I would have to lead her and say, hey, we're not doing that thing. But if she's facing forward, she assumes she's going to turn 1.5 and she faces backwards. And now that she's facing backwards, she assumes she turns 1.5 and she ends up facing forward. This has to be the default assumed degree of turn. Not a rule, not etched in stone, but that's what she's going to assume. Now, here's a mistake that people will make. Dance teachers sometimes teach this, and if your dance teacher teaches this, just cut it out. But if you're a student, don't do this first. This is a mistake. This is not your basic turn. Quick, quick, slow, slow, and quick, quick, slow, slow. Can you do that? Of course you can do that. However, by doing that, I am breaking the mold. I'm letting her know, don't do the thing that you normally do. You have to teach the normal thing and then branch off of it later. Here's a good example of why we want to do 1.5. If she were in sweetheart position, she's coming towards you. If I lead her out, I'm not connected to her. So I'm leading her for a free spin. She has to know, if I'm not touching her, how much should she turn, right? She is assuming 1.5. If she doesn't know it's 1.5, what if she ends up facing forward as a basic 1 turn? She's facing the wrong way, right?
So to make it easy, with a lack of lead, just assume 1.5 turns every time.
Yeah, so if we do these side-by-side free spins, it's the same thing. Like, we're facing both backwards, and when we do this turn, we assume 1.5, and now we're facing forward. We reverse that, and we went the other way. Now, could she do more than 1.5? Sure. Could she do just 1? Sure. But I have to physically lead her to do that. Because if I'm leading her forward, that same thing we did earlier, I can lead her any number of times, but I'm leading each individual turn. But in the absence of me telling her to do more or less, she assumes 1.5. That is your default degree of turn. So everything should be based around 1.5. And if you want her to do more, or if you need her to do less, you have to physically either lead her for an extra turn or stop her in the middle of that turn. All right, guys, tip number 5 for better two-step turns is when. That is turning at the right time, okay? So if she's on the wrong foot, she can't really comfortably turn the way that she needs to turn. So if you turn her leaders too early or too late, it's gonna make everything more difficult for her, all right? So for example, if we're in this promenade position, just leading a basic turn, if we lead her quick, quick, slow, slow. Now, because she's forward on that left foot, she's facing this direction, she's forward on her left, because her weight is on that foot, I can comfortably turn her to the left. Now, if she's facing this direction, if she's comfortably back with her left foot, I can turn her to the right. However, here's a mistake that we see with students all the time is they turn her early, they turn her late. So if I let her forward for a quick, quick, slow, and I don't let her get on that opposite foot, remember, she was forward on her left foot. Now she's forward on her right foot. If I try to turn her here, it's just going to get off balance.
Be all bent.
Right?
Yeah, and I did want to give a little tip of advice to the leaders because I see it a lot that leaders feel rushed or panicked to lead something because they feel like the follower is bored or they feel like they should be doing more turns or whatever it is. I specifically, and I think a lot of followers feel the same way, that I would rather you lead well and on the right time than try to do a lot of stuff because you're frantic that she's going to be bored or you feel like you're supposed to be peacock and show off or whatever. So just lead everything at the right time will be a lot more smooth.
Doing things better
yes.
is better than doing more.
Yes.
Okay? So we showed you what would happen if we let her early. Let me show you what happens if we lead her late. So if we go quick, quick, slow, so now at this point, because she's on that slow, this is where we should turn her. However, if we allow her to get on that foot or she's halfway through that, it's still giving that same problem. So really turning her at the right time. The way we suggest practicing is to practice things in pieces of quick, quick, slow, done. Quick, quick, slow, done. So you could go quick, quick, slow, done. There's a new thing that now starts for quick, quick, slow, done. That's finished, and now there's a new thing of quick, quick, slow, and then that's done. So that's always going to put you on the right foot. So really be conscious, leaders and followers, that you're leading it at the right time. All right, guys, tip number 6 for better two-step turns is connection. That is the places and the ways that you touch each other, okay? Like, this is partner dancing, so it doesn't matter if your footwork's right and like you're doing the steps right and the counts and everything, because you're dancing with a partner. That has to happen first. That's like first priority is the partnership itself. But how you connect to each other, not just touch each other, but how you connect to each other literally matters a lot. Like it's one of the things that people overlook a lot. So I'm gonna show you a little something called pistol grip. So she's gonna have her hand, so you notice her palm is downwards. I take my middle 2 fingers, not my first one, not my pinky, and I place this pin in that cup. Now she's got this magical little spot here in the center of her hand, and I take my middle 2 fingers and I put it in that spot. I'm never gonna hold, take, grab, squeeze, or pinch her, right?
Same for the follower.
I'm connected to her through this pin and cup. So if I'm leading her for a turn, I have those middle 2 fingers in that spot, and I'm never holding her hand and she's not holding mine. So even if I switch hands, I find that spot with the middle 2 fingers of the opposite hand, and I just connect through those middle 2 fingers. Like, think Spider-Man.
Yeah, and for the followers, you need to be aware of the connection while you're turning, not just at the beginning, not just at the end. What's he gonna ask me to do? Because he can have a combination in mind where he switches it up, so you kind of have to be hyper aware while you're turning, which is a lot to do, and because you're turning, you're doing a lot of the work. So just be aware during those turns of what he's asking you to do next, so it can be much smoother.
There's a huge difference between pattern recognition and following. I mean, there's just a big difference, okay? Pattern recognition means he starts a thing, she goes, I know that, and then she just does the thing that he led. There's no signals or cues or whatever, like, I'm not gonna wink 3 times and then she knows what that means, and like, a bird call or whatever. Like, there's just gonna be communications. The way that we communicate is like, so what she's basically saying is if I started this turn, that's not the only time I lead, because what if I lead it again? What if I lead it again? And maybe I come out it a different way than I normally do. You've got to be paying attention to that connection. But ultimately, it's better to not hold hands. I'm basically just putting those middle 2 fingers in that cup. She's not a lobster. Don't pinch and squeeze, okay? So she's creating that cup and I'm just stirring around in it. That connection is gonna make your turns so much better. All right, guys, tip number 7 of 12 for better two-step turns is speak the language. Dance is an actual conversation. The leader asked her to do stuff and she says yes. It's the only chance we have for that in life anymore. But you have to be very, very clear with the communication so that she can understand what it is you're asking her to do. So if you're asking her something, you're learning the language of how to communicate that ideal to her, right? Now, if you're just making a bunch of noise, then it's gonna be hard to determine when you are actually asking yourself. So here's a mistake that we see all the times with beginners, is that they're dancing and they're moving their body and they're swaying everything around and everything's going. A lot of people do that to kind of pick up the rhythm and all that stuff, and that's totally fine.
Yeah.
But you have to be very, very clear. She has to know something has changed if you're asking her to do something.
Yeah, and we get it. You're feeling the music, you're having fun, and so you wanna do all this stuff, but from the follower on the receiving end, there's not much difference between this and leading for a turn. So you could be doing that and then it's like, go, I'm leading you to turn. And we're not gonna catch that because on the receiving end, it's the same thing.
I like how she does that, by the way. Yay. So what I'm saying is if we're dancing and that arm is going down and up and is bobbing around, how is she gonna be able to tell a big difference between the time that the hand does actually come up and I want her to turn? However, on the other hand, if everything is still and we have motion and then something changes, it's much easier to determine like, hey, something is different, something's gonna happen, all right? So be very, very quiet unless you have something to say. All right, tip number 8 of 12 for better two-step turns is prep. That means to prepare. Like if you're gonna ask her to turn, you have to prepare her for that turn. Set her up like she's ready and she's able to do it, okay? So let's talk about how to prep. So if we were here, like from a basic promenade position, if I'm gonna turn her, I'm gonna lead her forward, turn her to the left. On that last step before I ask her to turn, I have to prep her, get her ready for that turn. So we're leading her for quick, quick, slow, and then on that second slow, I back her up to collect that momentum. So I'm exaggerating, but we're actually gonna back her up and then send her out. If we show you that from a sweetheart position here, if I'm gonna send her for a turn, we walk forward, there's no preps. And by the way, like, don't double prep, there's no point in that. So quick, slow, there's no prep, and then there's a prep, and then I can send her out, okay? A mistake that people will make sometimes, and it's not a huge thing, it's just more of a pet peeve, is leading her forward with the double prep, which is quick, prep. There's no reason to do that. That is just,
kind of like styling.
Doesn't look good.
And one thing I did want to say, for leaders, you have a lot to think about, and I totally get that. You're thinking about what you're gonna do next, and what you're doing now, and what you should have done, and all this stuff. But if you are going to prep, practice that and the timing of that, because as a follower on the receiving end of that, it can get kind of confusing if you're not prepping at the right time, or you prep sometimes for turns and you don't for others. So make sure that you practice that.
Yeah, so again, it goes back to what we were saying earlier, is do things when. The win actually matters. Yeah. So if we're leading her forward for quick, slow, and then she turns on a quick, slow, it's the last step before it. It's just that last step. We open the body so she has something to release. We store that energy so that we have something to release. All right, guys, tip number 9 of 12 for better two-step turns is that women are angels. Okay, so they have this halo. We've talked about this in so many videos, but it's one thing that people still continue to overlook. If I'm going to turn her, I have to place the hand into that halo, and by the way, that halo goes around her head, not over it, it goes around her head. Now, I picture this halo going around her head, and as I'm turning her, I have to move it the same circumference around that circle. Now, that halo is rounded, it goes around her spine the same distance the whole way around. Here's a mistake that people make, is they know about the halo, they know that women are angels and all that stuff. Yeah. Usually the guys that are married, they know that if they want to have a successful marriage, but they, instead of placing that halo around her head, they move it off to one side or other. And now if you've ever experienced a turn where this happens, where I turn her and then she has to kind of be pulled and ducked underneath, what happened is the halo moved away from her center. She's in motion. So like she's moving, so that halo has to move with it. We're rotating her around her spine. If I keep her with that same circumference, and as she's moving, I keep that halo moving around her, that's gonna work a lot better than if I go wide on one side and short on the other, okay? You are in control, and actually, not complete control, but you can greatly influence her balance and her turn. And the ladies would probably agree with me.
I like you a lot.
Comment down below, ladies, if you agree that dancing with a good leader is a lot easier than dancing with somebody who's pulling you all around. I mean, I pretty much all of you are going to agree with that, I'm pretty sure.
I'm just going to vote yes on that.
That's one of those things that are super important, is helping her to stay in the center of that halo. All right, guys, tip number 10 of 12 for better two-step turns is the 4 quadrants. Now, we talked about the halo that goes around her head. So if we picture this halo instead as a clock, all right, so Rose is facing this direction, so that is noon. This is 9, 6, and 3. When we lead a turn, we don't lead it the whole way around that clock. We lead it for 1/4, and then it glides the rest of the way until it gets to this point, and then we lead it again. So if I'm at the point where my hand is at noon, I lead for this first quarter. I lead and I allow her to do it. And then I lead and allow her to do it. And then I lead. We don't actually take that and just push her through the whole thing. We have to ask her. We have to ask her to do something, and then she says yes, okay? We don't have to make her do it. So as she's doing this turn, I lead and I allow her to do that. I lead, I'm asking her, and she says yes. I'm asking her, and she says yes. So if we show you that coming towards you, she's here at noon, and I lead from here to here. So I'm leading for 1 quadrant and allow her to do that. I lead it again. So I'm basically giving her more pressure for that 1 quadrant and then allowing her to finish that through, rather than trying to crank her through those whole turns. That is going to allow her to maintain her balance a lot better, the connection's going to be a lot better, and it's certainly going to look and feel a lot better. All right, guys, tip number 11 of 12 for better two-step turns is look where you're going, okay? What we're talking about here is spotting, okay? So we've talked a lot about spotting. You probably heard other dance teachers talk about spotting. Spotting is finding a spot and finding that place and looking in that direction. But in two-step specifically, you're going one direction. If this is our line of dance, we're moving there. So it's really important to look where you're going. You're always gonna spot in the direction of movement, not at your partner, which is a mistake that people make. So some people feel like, and they'll say that spotting helps them from getting dizzy. And I think for some people it does. For me, I just get drunk after 3 turns, so it doesn't matter anyways. But ultimately, sometimes it helps, but it also helps you to turn in a straight line. Okay, so if I look where I'm going, or Rose is looking where she's going, she's finding that spot, she's turning, it's gonna be the last thing to go and the first thing to go. So it's the first thing that gets there, her body continues to rotate until she snaps over that shoulder again. That's gonna allow her to correct her move. So like if she's turning towards you and she starts to veer off, like she says, oh, that's not where I'm going, I'm gonna recorrect that. It allows her to project her body in that direction. It is a huge mistake to spot on your partner, and a common one that people make. So if Rose were spotting at me, I've got my own place to go, right?
Gorgeous.
I've got places I've got to be, and I'm in motion also. Sometimes I catch up, sometimes I slow down, sometimes I come around the other side.
Yeah.
She wants to be spotting where she's going. Now, another mistake that people will make is they'll say, find a thing, a spot, or an object, and spot on that. And I actually don't teach that, and I'll tell you why. When you're dancing two-step, everything's moving down the line of dance. And if you're so used to finding a thing and looking at that and keep finding that thing, guess what's in front of you? Other people, right?
Moving.
They're what's in front of you, and they're moving. And sometimes they move faster, sometimes they move slower, sometimes they move side to side. So if your spot is constantly moving, you're constantly trying to find it, that's much more difficult. So rather than spotting on a thing, spot somewhere. Spot a direction, spot like a general area that you want to go, and then that is going to stay more consistent.
And another thing that people do that make a little bit of a mistake is that they don't spot on anything, and they're just seeing the whole entire room, and that's an easy way to get very dizzy.
Spotting doesn't happen with your eyes, by the way, it happens with your head. So if my head is moving with my body, but I'm just creepily looking at you, that doesn't count. Our body moves, but our head has to stay the same, okay? So we're spotting with our nose through our eyes, if that makes any sense at all. All right, guys, tip number 12 of 12 for better two-step turns is do it and do it some more. And then when you're done doing that, do it some more than that. Like, you're gonna have to practice. You're gonna have to do it over and over in order to get good at it. It's not gonna happen. We're not gonna tell you some secret today and all of a sudden you leave this video and all of a sudden your turns are awesome. Like, we can give you the information. I tell students all the time, like, they come in and we'll say, you know, we can't make you into a good dancer.
Yeah.
Right? We'll give you the information, but you have to make you into a good dancer.
And a little bit of a word of encouragement for followers or for leaders that are turning a lot and you get dizzy is that it gets so much easier. It's like going to the gym. You know, you can get all the right technique and form and all this stuff, but you're gonna be sore. And the only way to get through that is just to keep doing it more and more and more.
Yeah, imagine going to the gym, you got the perfect technique and you're trying to bench press 400 pounds. You never lifted weights. Like, maybe you can get there, but you got to start lower and work your way up. And it's the same thing. If you were going to play a sport, I mean, and dancing kind of is a sport, it's kind of an art, but it's kind of a sport. If you were going to play basketball, you can read every book in the world on how to shoot a better free throw. You can watch other people play the game and them tell you how they do it, and it's not going to make you better at shooting those free throws. Like, you have to understand what the form is and then practice it and rehearse it over and over, because you're just going to get continually better over time. So be patient, give it time, take these tips that we did in this, keep them in mind, pick one and practice that. Like, if you're practicing something, you can't practice all 12 of these at one time, but think of one thing and just do that until that becomes muscle memory, and do it over and over and over. Do it until the point where you're tired of doing it. And when you're tired of doing it, do it some more. And then once you've done it some more and you're irritated because I told you to keep doing it, do it some more, and then you're gonna get better. So,
and the dizziness gets better too.
By the way, guys, before we wrap this up, again, we're getting ready to start our summer tour. We're planning out our dates, okay? Tell us where you're at. Where should we go? What is a good place to go where there's a good country dance community where we can come dance and meet everybody, do some workshops, and so on and so forth. So thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you guys next time. Before we get into that, just... Yeehaw!
We're gonna have to pay for Gio's medical bills.
She's so mean to me. She tells me how to dress and how to talk.
Why are you bald? Is the miming show with Rose.